If you live long enough, you start to see patterns in people. My name is Harold Carter, and I spent my life in Houston, Texas. On my 70th birthday, my only son, Jason, decided to toast me in front of a crowded steakhouse. To my dad, he said, glass raised and smile tight. A man who never did much with his life. The laughter died quickly. You could hear forks scrape plates and the hum of air conditioning. My cheeks burned, but I held my tongue, forcing a smile that felt more like a wince. Jason's wife, Melissa, sat beside him, her nails drumming on the stem of her wine glass, lips curved just enough to enjoy my discomfort. I'd invited half the neighborhood, hoping for one good evening in a year of lonely ones. Jason brought his business friends, all sharp suits and sharper eyes. No one spoke. Even the waiters seemed to sense the tension, moving quickly, avoiding eye contact. Jason loosened his tie, leaned back, and gave me that familiar look, half amusement, half challenge. Come on, Dad, don't be shy. You ever think you wasted your time in this dusty town? He motioned to the cake, untouched. 70 years, and all you got to show for it is a beat-up pickup and a tiny house. I gripped my water glass, the condensation cold in my hand, trying not to show what I felt. The truth was heavier than anything else in the room. For years, I'd put away every dollar, skipped vacations, worked late into the night as a freight accountant, just to give Jason a shot at the life I never had. His words stung not because they were true, but because I realized I'd taught him everything, except gratitude. Melissa leaned in, her voice silky. We don't really need your blessing, Harold. Jason and I have built our lives just fine. She gave me the same look she used for spots on her dress shirts. Mild annoyance, nothing more. I set my glass down, the sound echoing across the table. I had something for you tonight, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was beating out of my chest. Something that would have changed your life. I looked at Jason, then Melissa. But after tonight, you can forget it. The air turned thick. One of Melissa's friends gasped. Jason's face twisted, a flush creeping up his neck. You're bluffing, he snapped. You couldn't even buy yourself a new TV. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I let the silence answer for me. My plan had been to sign over the deed to my house, a place worth over $1 million now, thanks to Houston's crazy market, but I watched that dream dissolve in the glow of the restaurant's lights. Jason shoved his chair back, the legs scraping the tile. You're a joke, old man. Always playing the victim. I'm done. Melissa grabbed her purse in his arm, her eyes colder than I'd ever seen. Let's go, Jason. We don't need him. They swept past, Jason's shoes squeaking as the doors swung closed behind them. I sat, suddenly alone at a table meant for celebration, the remnants of cake untouched, the gifts unopened. The chatter picked up again, but I barely heard it. 60 years, and my reward was a son who saw me as a roadblock. I paid the check. My hands were steady, even if the world felt like it was spinning. Outside, the Texas night was warm, the neon signs buzzing. I walked, not home, but into the city, the streets blurring as memories surfaced. I thought of all the sacrifices. Selling my old Chevy so Jason could attend college, working weekends to pay off his business loans, wiring money every time he called with a once-in-a-lifetime deal. I remembered his promises. I'll make you proud, Dad. I'll pay you back. He never did. That night, I stood in my empty living room, the only light from an old lamp flickering as the AC kicked on and off. On my lap, a photo album. Me, my late wife, Ruth, and Jason, back when he was just a kid, eyes wide with hope. Where had that boy gone? I ran my thumb along the edge of a picture, the faces blurring under my touch. I realized, maybe for the first time, that I'd been holding on to an idea of family that no longer existed. But I wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. This was only the beginning. Sleep wouldn't come that night. The clock on the wall ticked off the seconds, each one echoing the moments I'd wasted hoping Jason would grow up to be someone different. The air in the house felt heavy. I sat in my chair, hands folded, mind racing. I kept coming back to the same memory, a summer day nearly 20 years ago, when Jason was barely 18. He'd just gotten accepted to the University of Georgia. I remember standing on the driveway, watching a stranger drive off in my old Chevy S10. The cash in my hand was meant for Jason's first tuition payment. He hugged me that night, voice thick with emotion. "I'll make you proud, Dad. You'll see." He meant it, I think. Back then, at least. But life has a way of grinding hope into dust. I'd worked double shifts at Houston Rail Freight, eyes burning from spreadsheets, just to keep his tuition paid, his books bought. When his first business, some app about dog walking, crashed and burned, I gave him what was left of my retirement savings, no questions asked. He called me his rock, his hero. That was before Melissa, before success twisted him into something sharp and selfish. I opened the old photo album again, flipping to the page with Ruth's funeral. There was Jason, standing apart from the mourners, typing on his phone, already looking for a reason to leave. "Got a meeting, Dad," he mumbled, and was gone before I'd even finished shaking hands with the pastor. I never cried that day. Not then, not after. Somewhere along the way, tears dried up and were replaced by a cold, steady resolve. The house was too quiet, so I wandered into the kitchen, the tile cool beneath my bare feet. I brewed coffee, even though the clock read 2 a.m., and sat at the table where Ruth and I once planned our future. I traced circles on the old wood grain, thinking of everything I'd given up. Vacations, new cars, dreams of travel. I told myself it was all worth it, every bit of it, as long as Jason was happy. Now? I wasn't so sure. I turned on the old laptop Ruth had insisted we buy years ago. Its screen flickered to life, casting a blue glow on my tired face. Out of habit, I typed Jason's name into the search bar, curious what the world saw when they looked him up. There he was, Jason Carter, Houston's hottest new entrepreneur, according to a glitzy article on some business site. But I dug deeper, scrolling past the puff pieces, finding threads of doubt and whispers of trouble. One headline stopped me cold: "Local startup faces lawsuit over unpaid debts." I clicked through. Jason's latest venture, some fintech scheme, was hemorrhaging cash. Investors were bailing. His business partner had filed a complaint for unpaid loans. I leaned back, letting the realization sink in. All those years I'd told him to be careful, to watch the books, to save for a rainy day, he'd ignored every word. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. Maybe my useless life wasn't so useless after all. I picked up my phone and called an old friend, Joe Washington, who used to run finance at the railroad. He answered on the second ring, his voice gruff but warm. "Harold? It's 2 in the morning, you alright? I need a favor, Joe. Off the record. My son's in trouble. Business trouble. I want to know how deep." He paused. "That's not a call I was expecting. Give me a day, maybe 2. I'll dig around." "Thanks," I said, voice steady for the first time all night. "And Joe? Don't mention this to anyone. You got it, old friend." After I hung up, I grabbed a pen and a yellowed notepad from the kitchen drawer. I started writing, the words coming fast: Jason, debts, unpaid loans, lawsuit. Melissa, influencer, fragile image. I'd watched Melissa's Instagram over the years, a curated parade of perfect vacations, designer handbags, gourmet brunches. Her world was all about appearances. One crack, and she'd crumble. I scratched out ideas, a plan slowly forming. I wasn't out for vengeance. This was about justice. About making sure Jason and Melissa understood that old men can still fight back. They'd underestimated me. That was their biggest mistake. By dawn, the birds outside were beginning to sing, and I felt lighter than I had in years. The first step was always the hardest. Now, I was moving. After a shower and a shave, I drove to the old Houston Public Library, a place I'd spent hours as a young man. I needed information, and libraries were always quieter than offices full of lawyers and sharks. The reading room smelled of old paper and lemon polish. I sat up at a corner table, surrounded by stacks of financial journals and Jason's business filings I'd pulled online. My pen scratched out more notes: over-leveraged, investors fleeing, lawsuit looming, Melissa's endorsements dropping. It didn't take long to see the truth. Jason's business was built on sand. One good gust, and it would collapse. On the walk home, I stopped for a black coffee at a tiny cafe. I watched people rush by, kids heading to school, parents dragging tired feet, office workers glued to their phones. None of them knew what I knew. None of them had been called useless by their own flesh and blood. But I wasn't useless. Not anymore. I sipped my coffee, savoring the bitter taste. If Jason thought my story was over, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. The next few days passed in a blur. Joe Washington called back just after lunch on Tuesday, his tone grave. "Harold, you sure you want to know the details?" I looked around my cluttered living room, sunlight streaming through faded curtains. "Yeah, Joe. Give it to me straight." He sighed. "Your boy's in deeper than he lets on. He owes serious money to some tough folks, venture capitalists, not the kind who send polite reminders. There's talk of a federal investigation. Word is, he might be cooking his numbers to keep the business afloat." I sat heavily in Ruth's old armchair. "And Melissa?" Joe snorted. "That influencer life isn't what it seems. Her biggest sponsor dropped her last week. Rumor is, another's about to. There's whispers online about fake followers, bot likes. People are starting to talk." A small, sharp satisfaction took root in my chest. I thanked Joe and hung up. For years, I'd let Jason and Melissa's lives run circles around me, all glitz and self-importance. Now, for once, I felt like the one with the upper hand. It was time for action. First, I called my lawyer, an old-timer named Howard King. We met at a Greasy Spoon just south of downtown, the kind of place where nobody asked questions and the coffee came in thick ceramic mugs. Howard listened, his eyebrows climbing higher as I told him about Jason's meltdown, the ruined birthday, and the deed to the house. "So, you want to keep the house in your name?" he asked, scribbling on a napkin. I nodded. "And I want a new will drawn up. Everything goes to charity if Jason ever tries to have me declared incompetent. I want it ironclad, Howard." He grinned. "You always did think ahead, Harold. I'll have something for you to sign by Friday." After lunch, I drove to the credit union and closed the savings account Jason knew about. The young teller gave me a surprised look as she handed over a cashier's check. "Vacation plans, Mr. Carter?" she asked. "Something like that," I replied with a smile. That night, I searched the internet for Jason's investors, names, emails, news articles. I spent hours crafting a polite, anonymous note to his biggest backer, a woman named Evelyn Parker out in Los Angeles. The email was simple. "Before you commit more funds to Carter Financial, you may want to review recent filings in Harris County Court." I attached links to the lawsuit and screenshots of news coverage. I hovered over the send button, heart pounding, then clicked. The message vanished into cyberspace. It was my first real shot fired. 2 days later, Jason called, his number lighting up my phone just after 7 p.m. I let it ring twice before answering. "What do you want, Jason?" His voice was raw, angry. "Don't play dumb, Dad! I know you sent that email to Parker. She pulled out of my round. The deal's dead. You're trying to ruin me." I sipped my tea, letting him rant. "If you did nothing wrong, you got nothing to worry about. I said evenly. Maybe it's time to clean up your own mess. He cursed and hung up, the line going dead. Instead of dread, I felt a strange peace. For years, I'd lived in fear of disappointing Jason, of not giving enough. Now, for the first time, I realized the real gift was finally saying no. A day later, Melissa's voice appeared on my voicemail, sugar-sweet but trembling with panic. "Hi, Harold, it's Melissa. I just wanted to talk about Jason. He's been under so much stress. Maybe we could meet for coffee." I deleted the message. By the end of the week, social media was buzzing about Melissa's sponsors vanishing. A rival influencer posted screenshots of emails, evidence of shady deals, and manufactured drama. In a matter of hours, Melissa's picture-perfect online empire started to collapse. I watched it all with a sort of detached curiosity. Once, I would have felt guilt, maybe even pity. Now I saw it for what it was, the consequence of years of selfishness. On Sunday, I sat on my porch as the Texas sun dipped behind the rooftops, a gentle breeze stirring the old wind chimes Ruth loved so much. For the first time in years, I felt a kind of freedom. The future was uncertain, but it was finally my own. I decided to make one more call, this time to an old friend, Margaret Evans, who ran the local food bank. "Margaret, I've got some funds to donate. Ruth always wanted to help families in the neighborhood. Maybe we could start a scholarship fund for kids who can't afford college?" Margaret was quiet for a moment, then she laughed, pure joy in her voice. "Harold, that's the best idea I've heard all year. Ruth would be proud." I hung up and sat back, the weight of the past starting to lift. I wasn't done yet, not by a long shot. Jason and Melissa might have written me off, but I had other plans. Plans that didn't include being anyone's doormat ever again. As the stars blinked down above Houston, I smiled, knowing that, at last, the story of Harold Carter wasn't over. It was just getting interesting. By Monday morning, my phone was full of missed calls and texts from Jason. Each message sounded more desperate than the last. He never apologized, not really. Instead, he threw accusations like darts, blaming me for his failed deals, his collapsing marriage, even his tarnished reputation online. I read every word but answered none. I spent the next few days finishing the legal paperwork with Howard. We sat in his cramped office, signing documents that would make my wishes clear. If Jason or anyone else tried to take my house, my accounts, or my name, it all went to the community. No exceptions. I left Howard's office with a folder full of signed forms and a lighter step. Back home, I started cleaning out the attic. Dusty boxes held a lifetime of memories. Ruth's recipes, Jason's old baseball glove, stacks of photos from family road trips across Texas. I lingered over each one, remembering the smell of Ruth's hair as we drove through the hill country, Jason's laughter chasing fireflies on muggy summer nights. But those memories, I realized, belonged to a different time. The present was something else entirely. On Wednesday, Joe Washington called again. "You stirred up a hornet's nest, Harold. That Parker woman? She's contacting other investors, warning them to pull out of Jason's company. He's in full panic mode, laying off staff, scrambling for loans. There's even talk of a fraud investigation." I let out a long breath. "I can't say I'm happy about it, Joe, but maybe it's the lesson he needs." Joe was quiet for a moment, then said, "You know, sometimes the only way people learn is when the ground disappears under their feet. You did right by him for years, Harold. Don't let anyone tell you different." That night, just after dark, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Jason on the porch, rain plastering his hair to his forehead. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Melissa was with him, makeup running, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Dad, please," Jason started, voice raw. "We messed up. We need your help." I stepped aside, letting them in. They sat on the faded sofa, shivering, their confidence gone. Melissa tried to smile, but her eyes darted around the living room, searching for some sign of sympathy. Jason started talking, words tumbling out in a rush. The business, it's over. Investors pulled out. They're saying I lied. His voice broke. We lost everything. Even the house. Melissa's parents won't help, and the bank's coming for what's left. Melissa finally spoke, her voice small. My sponsors, they all dropped me. People are saying things about me online that aren't true. Please, Harold, we have nowhere else to go. For a moment, I almost gave in. Years of habit told me to reach for my checkbook, to solve their problems like I always had. But I didn't. Instead, I sat across from them and waited for the words that never came, words like sorry or thank you. Jason ran a hand through his wet hair, the silence stretching between us. You said my life was useless. I reminded him quietly. You said I never gave you anything. But I gave you everything I had. Now it's time you learned how to stand on your own. Melissa blinked, stunned. Jason's face crumpled with hurt. But Dad, we're family. Family means helping each other, not using each other. I said, my voice steady. I'll give you some advice if you want it. But I won't give you a bailout. Not this time. They left in silence, Melissa dabbing her eyes, Jason's shoulders slumped in defeat. After the door closed, I sat at the kitchen table, heart pounding. It hurt, a deep, familiar ache, but there was relief, too. I had finally drawn the line. The next morning, I called Margaret Evans again. We met at the community center, the air filled with the scent of brewing coffee and laughter. I handed her a check, enough to launch the new scholarship program in Ruth's name. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Harold, you're changing lives. That's what Ruth would have wanted, I said. And for the first time in a long while, I felt proud, genuinely proud, of what I was doing. Days later, a letter arrived in my mailbox, the handwriting unmistakably Jason's. I stood in the golden light of the Texas afternoon, the paper trembling in my hand. Inside, Jason poured out his regrets and excuses, ending with a plea. If there's anything you can do, Dad, please help us. We don't know what to do anymore. I folded the letter and placed it in Ruth's recipe box, next to the lemon cake recipe Jason had loved as a boy. Sometimes I realized you have to let people hit bottom before they start climbing up. That night, I sat on the back porch, the sun sinking behind the oaks. Houston was quiet, the world spinning on as always. My story, Harold Carter's story, had changed. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the author. And I was just getting started. The summer days in Houston rolled by, slower and sweeter than I remembered. For the first time since Ruth's passing, I started to feel like myself again. My house was quiet, but it was my own. Each morning, I brewed strong coffee and read the paper on the porch, listening to the distant whir of lawnmowers and the mockingbirds in the magnolia trees. I planted new flowers in the yard, and with every small task, I built a sense of peace that I'd almost forgotten was possible. But news about Jason and Melissa drifted in, whether I wanted it or not. A neighbor mentioned seeing them at the local job center, Jason in rumpled clothes, Melissa with sunglasses pulled low, avoiding old friends. Word spread quickly. Jason's failed startup was the talk of the block, and Melissa's social media silence was nearly as loud as her old bragging. I'll admit there were moments I doubted myself. I caught myself glancing at the phone, half hoping for a call, half dreading it. Old habits die hard. More than once, I found myself staring at the photos on the mantel, Jason as a boy, Ruth laughing beside him, all of us younger, gentler, full of hope. Sometimes I wondered if I'd gone too far, if I should have tried harder to save them. But then I'd remember the weight of Jason's words at my birthday, the years of sacrifices that were never enough, and I'd feel the boundary I'd set holding firm, protecting me from being swept back into their storm. The new scholarship fund became the center of my days. Margaret and I worked together, planning events, meeting with teachers, and reading letters from students who needed help. Their stories, single parents, first-generation college kids, children of immigrants, reminded me that the world was full of people who understood gratitude, who cherished a helping hand. One afternoon, a young man named Luis stopped me in the hallway of the community center. He looked nervous, clutching a worn backpack. "Mr. Carter, I just wanted to say thank you. The scholarship, it's going to change everything for my family. My mom's never stopped working, but now I can go to college and maybe make things better for her." I squeezed his shoulder, my voice thick. "That's exactly why we started this, son. Just pay it forward when you can." The sense of purpose that filled me was sharper and brighter than anything money had ever bought. I started volunteering in the evenings, serving meals, tutoring kids, listening to neighbors. The emptiness that once filled my house was now replaced with the energy of community, of making a difference. But the past wasn't done with me yet. One evening, as I walked home from the center, I spotted a familiar figure sitting on the curb beneath the streetlight. Jason. His suit was wrinkled, shoes scuffed, his posture defeated. "Dad?" His voice was hoarse. I sat beside him, the silence heavy between us. After a minute, he spoke. "I've been trying to find a job. No one will hire me. Everyone's seen the news, my name's Mud. Melissa's moved back in with her parents. She says she needs time to think. I'm living out of my car." I looked at him, my heart full of things I could say. But I waited. He stared at his hands, voice trembling. "You were right. I took everything you gave me for granted. I was so busy proving I was better than you, I didn't see how much I needed you. Or how much you'd already given." We sat for a long while, just breathing together in the quiet. Finally I spoke. "You have to rebuild, Jason. You can't just run back to what you had before. But you're still my son. And if you're ready to work, I'll help you find a place to start over. Not with money, but with a chance." Tears glistened in his eyes as he nodded. "I'd like that, Dad. I'd really like that." We walked the rest of the way to my house together. I made him a sandwich, just like Ruth used to, and we sat in the kitchen, sharing stories late into the night. He told me about his mistakes, the pride that blinded him, the loneliness that came with losing everything. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first step towards something new. The next morning, I called an old friend who ran a moving company. "You need anyone willing to learn, Jack?" I asked. "For you, Harold?" "Always," Jack replied. Jason started work the next day. The job was hard, the pay modest, but I saw a spark in him I hadn't seen in years. Each night, he came home tired but satisfied, telling me about the people he met and the lessons he was learning. One night, he sat beside me on the porch, looking out at the fading Texas sky. "Dad, I want to pay you back. For everything." I shook my head. "Just live a good life, son. That's all the payback I need." As the cicadas sang and the stars came out, I realized that letting Jason go had been the hardest thing I'd ever done. But in letting him fall, I'd given him the only chance he ever had to stand on his own. And maybe, just maybe, our family could find its way back, not to what it was, but to something better. As July faded into August, Houston simmered in the heat, and life settled into a new, quieter rhythm. Jason worked long hours with Jack's crew, hauling furniture in and out of houses under the relentless Texas sun. Some days he came home with sore hands and sunburned cheeks, but he never complained. Instead, he shared stories about the old veterans he moved, the single mothers starting fresh, the little kids who waved from apartment windows. We talked more in the evenings than we had in the last decade. Sometimes the conversation was easy, full of laughter and memories. Sometimes it was harder. One night, Jason stared at the coffee table, twisting his wedding ring in his fingers. "Melissa filed for divorce," he said quietly. I set down my newspaper and waited. She said she loved the man I was on Instagram, not the man I am now. I guess I never really knew her either. He shrugged. But his eyes were damp. Maybe that's fair. We were always chasing someone else's dream. He looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw not a rival or a stranger, but my son, the boy who once begged me to build him a treehouse, who cried when his puppy died, who hugged me tight when Ruth passed. That night, he let himself grieve, not just for Melissa, but for everything he'd lost along the way. I listened. Sometimes, that's all a father can do. As the weeks went on, Jason kept showing up, at work, at home, at the community center. He started volunteering with me, handing out food, helping kids with their homework, painting fences at the new youth shelter. One Saturday, he organized a moving truck for a family who'd lost everything in a fire. I watched him haul boxes, sweat running down his neck, and when the little girl hugged his leg, he knelt down and smiled at her like she was his own. "He's good with them," Margaret whispered beside me. "Maybe he just needed a place to belong." I nodded, feeling a quiet pride bloom in my chest. The scholarship fund flourished. Letters poured in, thank yous, hand-drawn cards, photos of graduates in caps and gowns. The walls of my living room soon held more memories than ever, not just of Ruth and Jason, but of dozens of children who'd found hope when they needed it most. One evening, as the sky faded from orange to indigo, Jason joined me on the porch with 2 glasses of iced tea. "I talked to Melissa," he said. "She's moving to California to start over. She says she forgives me, but we both need a fresh start." He paused, searching my face for judgment. "I don't blame her. I wasn't much of a husband." I reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "It takes 2, son. Don't carry it all alone." He sipped his tea, thoughtful. "Dad, do you think I can ever make it up to you? For everything?" I shook my head, smiling gently. "You don't owe me anything but the truth, Jason. And maybe a little patience. Life's long. There's still time to build something real, something you're proud of." We watched the stars come out, one by one, the night alive with the sounds of cicadas and distant music from a neighbor's backyard. In that moment, the world felt wide open, forgiving. Weeks turned to months. The pain of old wounds faded, replaced by the daily work of rebuilding. Jason found an apartment of his own, small, but clean and bright. He furnished it with hand-me-downs and thrift store treasures, and the first time he invited me over for dinner, he served spaghetti on mismatched plates and insisted on doing the dishes himself. "You know, Dad," he said, as we sipped coffee in his tiny living room, "for the first time, I feel like I'm earning my place." I smiled, thinking of all the years I'd spent trying to give him everything, never realizing that sometimes the best gift is the space to stand on your own. Melissa sent him a postcard from California. She was smiling in front of the Golden Gate Bridge, hair blowing in the wind, a note on the back in looping script. "Thank you for setting me free. I hope we both find what we're looking for." Jason pinned the card above his desk, right next to a photo of Ruth holding him as a baby. My house was quieter now, but it wasn't empty. Children from the community center dropped by after school. Neighbors waved from their porches. Margaret brought over fresh baked pies, laughing about her retirement and the endless work of caring for others. Every so often, I'd catch myself smiling for no reason, just because the world, for all its pain, had given me another chance. One night, as the cicadas droned and the city lights flickered on the horizon, Jason and I sat on my porch, watching the sky. He turned to me, serious and hopeful. "Dad, I want to start over. I want to build something that lasts. Maybe not a company or a fortune, but a life. Something worth being remembered for." I looked at him, saw the man he'd become, and nodded. "You will, son. We both will. It's never too late." And as the Texas night wrapped around us, I felt Ruth's presence beside me, gentle, forgiving, full of quiet pride. The old wounds had healed. The future, for the first time in years, felt bright and wide open. As autumn crept across Houston, the air grew cooler, and golden leaves drifted down to blanket my yard. The neighborhood was alive with the sounds of school buses and laughter, football games on Friday nights, and children's shouts echoing through the dusky air. My house felt different now, warmer, fuller, not because of anything I bought or owned, but because of what I'd finally let go. On a crisp Saturday morning, the community center held its annual fall festival. Margaret and I arrived early to set up tables, arrange pumpkins, and hang hand-painted banners the kids had made. Volunteers bustled around, filling the air with energy. Jason showed up, carrying boxes of donated books and games, his eyes bright, his laughter easy. The scholarship fund had grown far beyond my dreams. Dozens of families now found hope and help each year, kids heading off to college, single parents finding new jobs, veterans rebuilding their lives. People from all over the city came to thank me, but every time, I shook my head and pointed to Ruth's photograph hanging in the entryway. "It was her idea," I'd say. "I'm just following her lead." After the crowds thinned, Jason and I found a quiet bench beneath an old oak tree. The autumn sunlight filtered through the branches, turning everything gold. He turned to me, a hint of nerves in his voice. "Dad, I wanted to tell you. I've been saving up. Not much, but enough. I'm thinking about going back to school, maybe finishing that business degree I left behind. I want to do it right this time." I clapped him on the shoulder, pride welling in my chest. "That's the best thing I've heard in a long time, son. Just remember, whatever you build, let it be something that matters to you. Money's fine, but meaning lasts." He nodded, a small smile on his lips. "I get that now. It took me too long, but I see it." For a moment, we sat in silence, watching the children play. I felt a wave of gratitude, not just for this day, but for all the days I'd survived to reach it. Every hardship, every heartache had shaped us both, burning away what didn't matter, leaving only what was true. Later that evening, back at home, I pulled out an old journal Ruth had given me on my 65th birthday. Its pages were full of her neat handwriting, recipes, poems, notes about life and love. At the back, I found a letter she'd written but never shown me, the ink faded, the words as gentle as her voice. "Harold, if you're reading this, it means you're still fighting for this family. Don't let disappointment make you bitter. Remember, forgiveness is a gift you give yourself as much as others. Love is stubborn. It keeps growing even when it's cut back. Be proud of what you've built. Be proud of who you are." Tears stung my eyes as I closed the journal, her words settling over me like a blessing. That weekend, Jason invited me to his new apartment for dinner again. He'd cooked chili, spicy, a little too much salt, but good. We ate on the balcony, watching city lights flicker in the distance. "Dad," he said quietly, "thank you for not giving up on me. Even when I made it hard." I smiled. "That's what fathers do. And if you ever have a son or daughter, you'll understand." He looked thoughtful, and for a heartbeat, I saw a glimpse of the future, one where the pain and anger of the past had faded, replaced by something deeper. Not perfect, but real. The kind of family Ruth and I had always dreamed of. The holidays came, and for the first time in years, my house was full of laughter, of neighbors, of children running down the halls. Jason and I cooked together, burning the rolls and laughing about it. Margaret brought pie and a new boyfriend who played guitar for the kids. The living room rang with music and stories, everyone gathered beneath the gentle eyes of Ruth's photograph. As midnight approached, I stood on the porch, the air cold but clear. I looked up at the stars, steady, ancient, forgiving, and felt the weight of my years fall away. I wasn't wealthy, not in the way people counted dollars and cents. But I was rich, with lessons learned, with friendships, with second chances. I'd lost a lot, but I'd gained more than I ever expected: peace, purpose, and a family that had finally found its way back together. As the new year dawned, Jason hugged me tight. "I love you, Dad." I hugged him back, my heart full. "I love you too, son. Always." And as I stepped back inside, surrounded by laughter and light, I realized my life wasn't useless. It was just getting started, again.